Greetings, fellow Kerbonauts! Nerdy Spaceman here, in for another installment of A Beginner's Guide to Kerbal Space Program. And in this episode, we're going to get into orbit. The previous episode, we built a rocket capable of getting us there, but in this one, we're going to get there. Now, ideally, what we want to do is we want to go to the launch pad and select our rocket from here. It just saves us an extra step of going into the VAB, and we can always choose whichever crew we want as well. So this gives us a nice convenient place to select whichever rocket we want and launch it directly from here without having to go through the VAB and an extra load screen. Now, first things first, we're going to use the brand new experiment we have, the thermometer, and we're going to log that temperature and keep that data. This is going to be a catching up way. That's why we have two of them, so we can do a quick EVA and take that data and board back on again, and then we have two brand new thermometers that are ready to collect data. I'm going to right click on this one here and get ready to collect the data, but before I do that, I'm going to go SAS and max my throttle and launch. Right as we get off the launch pad, I'm going to log the temperature, and we have shore data. I'm going to keep that data. Now right away, I'm going to want to turn to the east. The reason I'm turning to the east is because the planet, Kerbin, actually automatically spins towards the east because it has a day-night cycle. And that is extra energy for the east. So if I launch my rockets towards the east, when I launch, I'm actually gaining extra energy out of it because that's the way the planet spins. That is ideal. I'm going to launch myself to the east until I get to about 70, 75 degrees. And that's at that point, I'm going to try and stop the turning because I'm going to be turning too fast. I'm going to turn on the gimbaling, and I'm going to leave it at the 70-degree line until I get to about 10,000 meters. At that point, I'm probably going to turn on my prograde, which is going to travel directly at it, because ideally what I want to do is I want to have my prograde marker pointing right at the 45-degree line right here, the circle over there, when I'm about 15,000 meters. So right now I'm above it, and it's staying put at 60 degrees. If I tilt a little bit from 70 to say 65, you'll notice as the prograde marker moves down a little bit farther from the 60-degree line to the 55-degree line. And eventually I can just push the prograde marker, and you'll see as gravity pulls my ship down and I'm hitting the 15,000 meter mark, I'm right above the 45-degree line, and this is a good entry angle. Now before it's too late, I'm going to go ahead and log a temperature from the upper atmosphere. Now I have flying over the shores and flying over and in the upper atmosphere thermometer data, and that's excellent. We want thermometer data because we need to catch up on that. Now we don't have flying over the water, but that's quite alright. We can get that data later. Now as we're going and we're running out of fuel, we can open up our map view and see how far up we are. Space starts at 70,000 meters, and you can see at our highest point, our Apoapsis, it's just hit that point. Going back to this view, you'll see that we're almost out of fuel. So I'm going to go ahead and let it run out of fuel and stage it, and then immediately switch off the engine. So I'm going to stage it and switch off the engine, and we're going to coast our way up into space. We've gotten all the way up to 93,000 meters, which is quite a significant amount. Once we get up to that point, we're going to want to burn to the east directly. So we're going to point our rocket at the horizon, which is the point at which the blue hemisphere turns into a brown hemisphere. That's going to point us directly at the horizon. The blue represents the sky, the brown represents the earth, and a nav ball you're going to find in every airplane that you will ever fly in, and they're usually oriented so that the horizon is flat. But since we launch straight up, it's vertical, so it looks a little bit different. Well, it looks on its side. That's quite alright. Once you start hearing the music, you'll know that you're above 70,000 meters, and you're officially in space. I'm going to go ahead and point this at the horizon using the WASD keys, and you'll notice that it's going to keep tilting me back. That's because I'm still in prograde, so I can go do stability assist and then point myself, and the SAS is still on, still trying to stabilize me, but it's letting me stabilize in any direction I want. These buttons point you in these three cardinal directions: forward, back, up, down, left, right, and they're opposites. Back, and then down, and then right, if you do forward, left, and up. But that's that's for another episode. For now, the only ones we care about is prograde and retrograde. So for now, we're going to go ahead and point ourselves at the horizon, and when we mouse over the Apoapsis, it's going to give us a T count as well, so T minus. When we get to T minus 30 seconds-ish, it's usually a good number, we're going to go ahead and hit the Z key to max our throttle, and keep ourselves pointed at the horizon. Now you can actually pilot the craft in this view so long as you have your nav ball up. The moment you hide your nav ball, you can no longer control your craft. So it's always good to have it open. Now, we've left the atmosphere, and we're in space. And we're pointing ourselves directly at the horizon, so we're neither trying to gain nor lose altitude, we're just trying to get faster and faster. This is called trying to reach orbital velocity. That means you're at an altitude that never changes from the surface of the planet. The International Space Station is in an orbit. It has orbit speed, means it's traveling fast enough to stay in space. What this means is it's like throwing a baseball so hard that it flies around the planet and hits you in the back of the head. But instead, you're throwing the baseball once you're already in space. That would be orbital velocity. So with the bottom two stages of our rocket, we got ourselves out of the atmosphere, and with the final stage, we got us into space. Now, eventually, these will loop around, and you're going to get this type of a node. You're going to have your Apoapsis and your Periapsis. Periapsis is the lowest point in your orbit, and you want that to be above the atmosphere, which it is now, and I've killed the engines. So this is what it means to be in orbit. At the lowest point, meaning we're falling until we get the Periapsis, at this point we start to gain altitude all the way up to the Apoapsis. Once there, we start to fall again towards the Periapsis. When we're in space, we can collect science. So let's hop to it. I'm going to do an EVA report, and I'm going to take the 2 thermometer data I collected from before, and I'm going to start collecting my own data. I'm going to do an EVA report of space just above the water. Now the cool thing is you can store these experiments, and you can keep doing EVA reports. Now this is still water, but if you keep doing it, eventually you're going to hit different biomes, because we're moving so fast, we're going to hit different biomes. So there's the shores, and then you're going to go and store it, and then you do another EVA report, reset it, another one, and there's the grasslands, and then you store that. And then you do an EVA report, reset it, EVA report, and keep doing this until you hit different biomes as you fly over them. Now I believe that there's nothing but grasslands here, and eventually once the grasslands run out, you'll hit the shores. At any moment, there's the shores, and after the shores you hit the water. Well, we already have water, shores, and grasslands, so we can go ahead and collect more experiments, like space thermometer data. We can also collect, actually no, this is deploying close. We can observe the mystery goo, keep that data, we can collect it and restore it. We can also observe science crew data. Okay, we can store everything, and we can board, and it looks like we have data there that I wasn't able to collect. I'm going to go ahead and EVA and collect that data. There it is. Collect it and restore it, and then board again. And let me see here, do I have a crew report? Temperature, EVA, mystery goo, materials, temperature. Nope. So I have to keep all of these, and I need to do one final crew report. And there it is. Now I've collected all of my science experiments, and I have to take it and store it to make sure everything is stored, and I can do another crew report. And that's how you collect science in space. Now, as we fly around the planet, we'll be able to collect different types of science in different parts of the planet. And that's interesting because of the way the biomes change. But before we do that, I'm going to teach you about time warp. When you're in space, unlike the atmosphere, you can go much faster than 4 times time warp. Even the first level of time warp gets us to 5 times speed. From there, it only gets faster and faster. You can see here. It caps out because we're really close to the atmosphere, but that's quite alright. we can manually speed up, and at this point we're moving 50 times speed, which is extremely fast. The reason I'm moving so fast is because I want to fly to this area over here. You can tell here because it's got different biomes. You've got mountains and highlands, and then eventually deserts. I want to collect as much science per trip as I can possibly get my hands on. And I'm going to go ahead and slow us down, do an EVA report, and I'm going to keep doing the same trick I did from before. There's the shores, and there's the highlands, then I can store that, and then I'm going to have the mountains, and I can store that, and then I can board. Then I can continue flying because it's mountains and highlands and then back to grasslands. I can time warp some more. Eventually I'll hit the deserts. And I can do another EVA. And I can do the deserts and keep that data and board. Now I've collected a whole bunch of science, a whole mess of science. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to point my craft in a more ideal location. That's going to be towards the north. There we go. Rotate it around so I can see the sun better. And then I'm going to do an EVA and talk about something that I've been doing that I don't know if you've caught that yet, but I've been, not in every time I've EVA'd, I haven't been connected to my craft. And this is very important because if you use the spacebar in space and you're letting go once you're holding on the ladder, instead of falling anywhere, you just drift away. And at this point, you can't do anything, and you're going to fly so far away that you're not going to be able to grab back on again. But never fear, every single Kerbal has a jetpack. You can switch it on with the R button, and it's going to turn on the RCS. And using the WASD keys is you can shift your way around. Now this is simple Newtonian physics. So, Newton's law number 1, an object in motion stays in motion until you apply a force. So if we apply a force, let's say the D key, I'm going to keep flying this way. And I'm never going to stop flying this way until I counteract that with the A key to stop my motion. Then again, if I do the A key, I'm going to keep flying in that direction and never stop until I play the D key to counteract that force. Now, another force is the opposite and equal reaction. So for example, if I add thrust towards that direction, I'm going to travel towards that direction, and vice versa. And that is how the thrusters work. Now, the WASD only push you forward, back, left, and right. To go up and down, you do shift, the left shift, the throttle up, and to go down, you do the left control, pretty much throttle down. And those are the controls. Now, if you want to turn, just turn your mouse and apply any of the thrusters, and you'll automatically point away from where you're facing. So point towards the pod, now we go towards it. And then you can slowly, carefully, and gently steer your way back, and F to grab, and B to board, and you will find yourself back onto your spaceship. And that is how you do an EVA. Now, one final trick that we're going to do is we're going to get to space high. Now, so far we've been doing space near, but what we can do is we can do space high. Now, the way we do that is burn prograde in any direction and add velocity. But to do it most efficiently, you can add prograde at the periapsis, meaning you add speed at your lowest point. That'll increase your highest point. So for example, if I add a maneuver node, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and I can add a maneuver node. So I'm left clicking on a trail and adding a maneuver node, and then you'll see the logo, the prograde logo and the retrograde logo. Prograde means adding velocity, so I'm going to add velocity in this direction. And you'll see by the dotted line that I'm going to add to my Apoapsis. I'm going to keep adding, and you'll see this dotted line get farther and farther away until we get to space high. Space high over Kerbin is anything over 250,000 meters. And here we go, I've added a little bit, and there it is, 253,000 meters. So at this point, when you add speed in the prograde direction, your orbit changes to look like this. You can then point yourself at that maneuver node, and then go to stability assist and manually adjust it so that it's perfect. And then you can click right after it and warp to the next maneuver. And it's automatically going to time warp until you get there at T-1 minutes. Now you can look at this bar here. This bar here tells you how much more you have to burn to get to that altitude, or to get to that speed. So we need to add another 97 meters per second. It also depletes as you get closer and closer to that speed. This number here says the estimated burn. So we need to burn our engines for 5 seconds to get this change to happen, and with this engine and this power at this weight. So it's automatically calculated. And at the very bottom, it counts the T minus number. So at the maneuver node, we have T minus 28 seconds until we hit that point in time. Ideally, we want to split the difference. So if we have a 10-second burn, we want to burn for 5 seconds. If we have a 1-minute burn, we want to start at the 30-second line. So essentially, when we have, let's round up to 6 seconds. If we have a 6-second burn at T minus 3 seconds, you max out your engines, and assuming the math is right, at T plus, you should be pointing at the right direction at the right speed. And at this point, our maneuver node changed, so I'm going to chase it down, and then I'm going to add a little bit of speed while trying to balance on that maneuver node as I'm slowly depleting the energy from here. And you'll see, eventually this will turn into a green check, and you can click it to remove the node. And our Apoapsis, as you can tell, is above 250,000 meters, and that would be space high. So I can click on that point and warp there. It'll automatically warp us there and switch off our warp when we get there. Now the reason I want to warp and get up there is because I want to collect signs from up there, because it is different signs from space near the Kerbin. Now when the warp stops, we're above 250,000 meters and we're starting to fall, so we've hit the highest point. I can then do crew report for space high over Kerbin and continue collecting all of the other science experiments. And I can collect them all at once. Oh, not that one. Collect log. And then keep them all at once for space high over Kerbin. Then I can do an EVA report, and you'll notice that this time it doesn't recognize biomes, it'll just say high over Kerbin, because I'm too far away to recognize the biomes. So, I'm going to go ahead and collect all of my data and restore, and then I'm going to take all the data from the thermometers, take all the data in the pod, and work my way down and take the science data and restore everything, and then board. Now I've returned all the data in here, and I'm in space. Now when you're at your lowest and you want to gain altitude, you burn prograde at your lowest. When you want to lose altitude, you burn retrograde at your highest. So I can point us in the retrograde, and I can start burning, and you'll notice that our Periapsis is going to start going down. So here it is with a little bit, and you'll see how it's slowly starting to decrease. This is very interesting, because we want to go down and land on the surface. Now ideally, I want to land, let's say, in the desert. It's in the sun, we can see it, so it'll make for an easy landing. So I'm going to burn more retrograde, and I'm going to keep pointing here, and I'm going to eventually decrease my Periapsis until it hits the surface. And that would be interacting with the planet. Now at this point I want to keep burning it until I get to about, I don't know, let's say in the water here. Now the reason I'm doing this is because by the time we fall and get to that point, Kerbin would have rotated out from under us. And I can show you by time warp. As I increase the time warp, you can see Kerbin's rotating. It's eventually going to rotate itself so that when we enter the atmosphere at 70,000 meters, we're right on the coast. And I timed it just perfectly. Now this is quite alright, because even though I have extra fuel, I'm not going to need to burn any, because as we enter the atmosphere, both Kerbin will rotate, and the atmosphere is going to slow us down, so that we won't have to worry about landing. It'll automatically slow us down, and you can see here our Periapsis, or Apoapsis, is dropping because of the air pressure slowing us down. And as it slows us down, this will curve itself all the way up into the desert somewhere, hopefully. So I'm going to go ahead and have faith, and I'm going to jettison the stage in just the right time, because we're starting to get re-entry effects. And you don't want to have your engines on when that happens. Now at this point you can tell my batteries are depleting very quickly. That's because I have a retrograde on. If I turn on stability assist, the batteries deplete a lot less because it's not trying so hard to point us in a specific direction. It's just trying to keep us from rotating at all. So at this point I'm going to manually adjust it so that I'm pointing at the retrograde, and I'm going to let the heat shield take the brunt of the heat. That's what it's there for. It's also going to reduce my battery by a small amount, and it's not going to be much, so it's going to be quite alright. I can always right click on the parachutes, and it's going to tell me that it's unsafe to deploy these parachutes. And it's going to be unsafe for quite some time. Meanwhile, I'm going to constantly be balancing my craft so that I'm pointing directly at the retrograde, because I don't want to turn and expose any parts of my craft to the re-entry heat. Eventually, I'm going to slow down significantly so that I can actually land, and if you'll notice, this is dragging closer and closer to the deserts, and hopefully I'll land in the deserts. By the looks of it, I might even land in the mountains, but we'll see how that plays out. Either way, I haven't landed in either of those biomes, so that'll be new science for me. Now that I'm moving below the sound, or right below Mach 2, and I'm going to soon hit below the sound barrier, I can right click on my parachute and anticipate when it would be the safest time to deploy my chute. I can turn off my SAS at this point and let the craft wobble itself. And now that it's safe, I can deploy my parachutes, and the craft is automatically going to orient itself in the correct direction. Now that I just have to wait to get down there, I'm going to go ahead and time warp until we get to the landing. And here we are. Looks like we just dodged the mountains. And I'm going to go ahead and reduce speed, and here it is, my chutes have deployed. And I'm going to go ahead and lock temperature over the deserts. I can then do a crew report over the deserts, but unfortunately Materials Bay and Mystery Goo give me no data because they all think I am flying and they can't recognize biomes. So I'm going to reset the two of them, and then I'm going to hop out for an EVA, make sure I grab the ladder, you don't want to not be holding on, and do an EVA report flying over the deserts. Keep that data, take the thermometer data, take all the crew data and board so as to reset everything, and then time warp our way all the way down to the bottom. Now this is the boring part of landing, and at least you've made it. Sometimes you might get to this point and realize you're about to land on a hill, and what you can do is you can turn on your SAS right before you hit the ground, and it's going to want to keep you oriented so you don't roll down the hill, because that has happened to me before and it is not fun. But at least we're safe, we haven't burned up, and we haven't lost any of our experiments due to re-entry. And this was generally a successful run. Now that I'm getting close to the ground, I'm going to switch off time warp, turn on my SAS because there's a bit of a hill here, and I don't want to roll down this hill. So I'm going to wait to land. Here we go. And, there it is. Turn off my SAS, and here I am. Now it's time to collect data. Crew report from the deserts, Mystery Goo, Materials Bay, and thermometer. All from the deserts. And I can hop out and unfortunately fall out of my craft. But that's quite alright, I've already collected the science I need. I can then take a surface sample and an EVA report, and I can recover. Now unfortunately, if I can't get back into my craft and I recover, I'm only going to recover my Kerbal. The craft is going to remain on the planet along with all of its science. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the tracking station, and I can actually find my lander or my craft and click on it here, or I can click on it from the list of craft that are available. I can click on that, and then I can click the recover button, and I'll be able to recover the rest of my science. And look at that science. 253 science accumulated over this one flight, because we went all over the place. Sorry this video took so long, but we had to go over the basics of orbits and flying, and also an introduction to maneuver nodes. We will do much more complicated flights and stuff later, but for now just celebrate with going into space and getting all of that done. This is Nerdy Spaceman. Stay safe and fly far.